Hello, welcome to this week's sermon. This sermon is for the 22nd of June 2025, and that will be the 12th in Ordinary Time, Year C. And I'm using the second set of readings, and those are Genesis 24, verses 1 to 27, Psalm 57, and Mark's Gospel, chapter 5, verses 21 to 43. And this week I'm going to include the story that I use in the full order of service on the Sunday, because I'm going to refer back to the story in the course of the sermon. If ever you want to see the whole thing, the whole service, then please have a look at YouTube channel St. Paul's Methodist Church, Remuera. So here we go with the offering for this week, but please bear in mind that this is going to be the last one for some time. I'm due some long service leave, so I'm going to be away for about 10 weeks after this coming Sunday. So I hope some of you are still there by the time I get back in September, but all the very best until September after this week's sermon. So, the story for the 12th in Ordinary Year C. Now, I may have told this story before. Please forgive me if I have, but it's so fitting for today's sermon, I'll use it again. I was 8 years old, and it was Christmas morning. I raced downstairs and, with my sister and brothers, started hunting round the house to find where Father Christmas had left our presents. I soon found mine. Top of the pile was a box in the shape of a cube, about 4 inches by 4 inches. I unwrapped it. I knew what I had hoped to get for Christmas. This box shape didn't seem to fit, so it must be some kind of surprise. When the box emerged from the wrapping, I found myself staring into the face of a cowboy. Excellent. I was hoping for some toy soldiers, but even if it were toy cowboys and Indians, that would do just as well. You were allowed to play at cowboys and Indians when I was a child, without grown-ups thinking you were making a political statement on European colonialism and the rights of indigenous people. We thought we were just playing with toys. Anyway, this smiling cowboy had a name in large red letters beneath it, which read, "Hop Along Cassidy." I guess that would be an offensive statement against disabled people today. But back then, we thought it was a reference to his bow-legged walk after he had been on his horse all day. As I examined the box to see how to open it, alarm began to rise inside me. If it was a set of cowboys and Indians, there couldn't be enough for the shootout at the OK Corral, because the box was just too small. Finding my way inside, I had a great surprise. It was a watch. A Hop-Along Cassidy cowboy wristwatch. You know, one of those children's watches which tells you it's always 10 past 10 or 4 o'clock. Or 20 past 8. Very nice and all that, but not what I was looking for. And Father Christmas might have boobed on this one, because I was learning to tell the time quite well by now, and didn't really still need a toy watch. So I put it aside and looked further for my elusive soldiers. I soon found them, just what I had wanted. They came in a long box with an array of 8 troopers, each in the throes of shooting, throwing a grenade, waving a pistol aimlessly in the air like a true officer. And one of them was caught in the act of being shot, with his arms akimbo. I played with my soldiers for the next hour or two, teaming up with the troopers my brother had received. I thought they were fine, stout, plucky Tommies, the best of British soldiery. But years later, I recognised them to be American paratroopers. Oh well. So, Christmas Day unwound amidst the growing pile of discarded wrapping paper, until my mother asked me, where my watch was, and did I want to put it to the right time and wear it? Only at that point, with my mother demonstrating before my eyes, did I see that it was a real watch. Gifts are not always easy to recognize. And now on to the sermon proper. I admit I was rather puzzled by the idea of Abraham asking his servant to place his hands between or possibly beneath his thighs. That shows, firstly, that I haven't read this passage in a while, and secondly, that my mind immediately runs along 21st century lines rather than biblical ones. The meaning of the symbolic action is, of course, fairly obvious when you stop to think about it. Putting his hand between or possibly beneath Abraham's thighs was an act of submission. His hands were near to Abraham's reproductive organs, which symbolized that the oath being made would be policed in the future by Abraham's descendants, if required. His hands were also next to Abraham's thigh muscles and his gluteus maximus, or buttock, the biggest muscles in the human body, thereby symbolizing his submission to Abraham's power and authority. The psalmist depicts a similar submission to the power and authority of God when he speaks of hiding between the wings of God, or between the wings of the seraphim. We see similar acts of submission in the New Testament passage as well. Jairus throws himself at Jesus' feet, despite being a synagogue leader and therefore a man of some respect about town, and despite any past hostility between Jesus and some synagogues. The woman in the crowd who touches Jesus' robe kneels at his feet once Jesus confronts her. Whereas those mourners wailing around the child's bed in Jairus' house, who mocked Jesus, were thrown out, and pretty quickly too. All these acts of submission to someone more powerful than they were are plain to see. We have recently witnessed the excruciating submission paid by Zelensky to President Trump in that famous White House encounter. We find that embarrassing and excruciating to watch. But 1,000 years ago, such demonstrations of feudal fealty were commonplace. Everyone had a place and was expected to keep it. Acts of submission do not sit well with modern generations. We assume equality, whether we are entitled to or not. We used to call our minister Mr. Napier when I was a boy. And when, as a probationer minister, I once called the synod superintendent by his first name, I was reprimanded afterwards by one of the older blokes for having been over-familiar. But fashions change. Within 10 years of that, even young children would be addressing me as Trevor. So perhaps the people of our generation, our time and place, need to relearn an uncomfortable lesson. We are not God's equal, whether we act like it or not. When approaching God, we should show reverence, submission, and an acknowledgement that we come before the Lord God Almighty, not before Rita or Gerald from next door. These acts of submission cut both ways, however. Yes, the inferior was acknowledging the authority of the superior, but in so doing, the weaker party was gaining the protection of the stronger. The servant is entrusted with a critical task to go to find a suitable wife for Isaac, Abraham's son. This would normally have been the father's job. Why did Abraham not go, therefore? Was Abraham too old to travel? Or was he unable to return? He had fled his ancestral home under duress, after all. Perhaps you remember the story. Abraham had refused to serve in his father's shop because it sold idols. One day, Terah, his father, left Abraham in charge anyway. Whilst Terah was away, Abraham took a stick and smashed every idol in the shop, apart from one. His father was outraged. But, said Abraham, it wasn't me. It was that idol up there on that shelf, still intact. He did it to all the other idols. Terah said that was impossible, thus proving Abraham's point. This enraged the local ruler, Nimrod, who put Abraham into a fiery furnace. But like the Daniel story of 1,000 years later, Abraham survived. Nimrod was still angry, and so Abraham and his father and 300 of the family clan had to leave Ur and start their journey towards Canaan. Perhaps it was too risky to go back himself, therefore. Hence, Abraham sends his servant. Why didn't Isaac go and look for his own wife, you may ask? Well, it could be that Isaac was still too young. Betrothal took place at very early ages in that society. Or was it because Abraham feared Isaac might stay there and not return? That would be my suspicion. Abraham had shown great faith in attacking the idol worship of his home country, and God had honoured him by offering him a new land to call his own, and a child, an offspring to people it. Abraham did not want to risk his progeny turning their back on God's gracious gift. The author of today's psalm is believed to be none other than King David himself, and Psalm 57 is said to have been composed by David whilst he was hiding from an angry King Saul in the caves at Adullam. Protection had been God's gift to young David, both from Goliath and later adversaries such as King Saul. The gift granted to Jairus and the woman in the crowd was healing. So all received what they required. Abraham's servant had a most successful mission and brought back a beautiful, kind, and sweet-hearted wife for Isaac. David escaped with his life time and again from various opponents, including his own son at one point. Jairus and the woman in the crowd received new life. Life after death, you might call it. Metaphorically so for the woman who would have been an outcast even within her own home, according to the Jewish law, and literally so, life after death, for Jairus' daughter. The message for us is, don't reject the grace offered by God. Don't despise what God is offering. Chief among the gifts of God is Jesus. How many in the world ignore God's gift of Jesus and would leave Jesus to walk on past, never thinking to bring their cares and worries to him? So much for them. What a friend we have in Jesus. God has given Jesus to the world, and much of the world shrugs its shoulders and moves on. In the same way as I put aside the gift of my first wristwatch, taking only a cursory look and jumping to a wrong conclusion. So too, many take only the most cursory of looks at Jesus before moving on to lesser things. We can at least say that we have avoided that mistake. We have taken a closer look at God's gift to the world of Jesus, and hence we are here today. But would we ever be foolish or arrogant enough to disdain the many other gifts of God? Well, I suppose we have to learn to recognize those gifts to start with. And God's gifts come in many forms. The gift, like love itself, is in the eye of the beholder. For Abraham's servant, God's grace came to him in finding Rebekah. She was Isaac's second cousin, or first cousin once removed. Such marriages were common in those days and would be permitted in most countries today. So not only is Rebekah ethnically, and we trust theologically, a good match, but she is also beautiful and generous and hard-working, as she demonstrates by watering the camels. There is no mistaking the gift Jairus and the woman in the crowd received from Jesus. Just as David was in no doubt that God had saved him time and time again from danger. They dig a pit for me, he says, and they fall in it themselves. In each case, they responded with praise and thanksgiving once they recognized that God had blessed them. And that remains our duty to this day. There are 1,001 ways God may show his favour to you. It may be in ways others would fail to recognize. Watering my camel is not one of the signs of God's love and guidance that I'm likely to be looking for. Events, opportunities, near shaves, which others might take as their due, or just part of the fabric of living, may be for you an answer to prayer, a fulfilment of a dream, a blessing from God. Do not despise the gifts of God. Do not discount God's favour just because others fail to recognize it. Be grateful to God and sing his praises with a thankful heart, like King David in his psalm. That will not only bear witness to the goodness of God, but also prepare you to recognize the next gift when it comes along. Amen. And I hope I see you again in September.